theory about the structure of gas and water, a presentation of the 5th volume about potential vortices from 2020. The aim is the theory about the water engine. On the one hand, I begin to talk about the size of elementary particles, and on the other hand, I revive the atomic model according to Niels Bohr. The theory originated in the first Transfer Center for Scalar Wave Technology, which I founded in 1989 as the Transfer Center for Propulsion Technology of the Steenbeeks Foundation for Economic Development of the state of Baden-Württemberg. The water motor, the basics of which we are dealing with, is more related to drive technology, which has also been my profession for 30 years. The first step is about the radius of the proton. I reported on this in several journals, first in German and then in English, and gave presentations on it at international congresses. The subject stirred up the whole community of scientists. The radius of the proton was measured to be 4% to 5% too small when it was sampled with heavy particles instead of electrons, as was previously the case with muons, which are over 200 times heavier and where the results therefore also scatter less. The research started in Germany and was carried out at the muon accelerator of the Paul Scherrer Institute in Switzerland. Even Nature has reported on the shrinking of the proton. On the 2010 cover it says, "A new value for the charge radius is the key to subatomic particles." They make the point that the proton has lost the guiding function it had until then. In the meantime, it has been replaced by the Avogadro constant. I have found an explanation to the open puzzle of particle physics. I start from the law of the square of distance. I take a field source, a sun or even simpler a light source, then at a distance r the area A is illuminated, and at a distance of 2r the area is 4 times as large, and so on. You can also apply this to a spherical symmetry. The light of the field source decreases with the square of the distance. The result is the law of the distance square of the electric or magnetic field. If we solve for the radius r, we see that it depends on 1 by the square root e or h. This means that the field determines the linear dimension. It tells us what a beta is. The field thus also determines the speed, which is measured in meters per second. As an example, if a length of 1 meter is increased by 10%, the speed will also increase in this direction, although we cannot observe this because the speed of light also increases. A measurement of the speed of light would be pointless, because it would take place with itself. The known measuring constant c equals 300,000 kilometers per second is measured, so we are optically deceived. The speed of light is therefore no longer a natural constant. Under these conditions, we can now calculate the proton as a function of the mass involved. The radius of the proton sampled with a muon is proportional to the reciprocal of the masses of proton and muon involved. This is related to the radius of the proton sampled with an electron, as it was usual until today. The result is 0.95, that is, the proton has become 5% smaller, corresponding to the measured value. If we take the recognized radius values of proton and electron, the electron is 3 times as large as the proton. In a neutron decay, the huge electron slips out of the too small proton. This is the doctrine, but it seems impossible. Question: how does the giant fit in the toy car? Well, let's calculate the problem. The radius of the electron sampled by a proton is this time related to the radius of the electron sampled by another electron. When the electron slips out of the proton, it has become larger by a factor of 30. The problem is solved because the size of the particles depends on the field strength and thus on the distance from the field source. After several particles like deuterium, like tritium or helium were correctly predicted by me, which was confirmed by the measurements at the muon accelerator in Villingen, it has become quiet around the German Muse group. We can now attend to the next problem, Bohr's atomic model, under the heading, the new structure of gas, assuming a balance of centrifugal force and electrical attraction between the positively charged nucleus and the negative shell electrons. Bohr concluded that electrons move around their nucleus like planets around the sun. For the quantum number n equals 1, the radius r1 equals 53 picometers can be calculated, and this results in 2 electrons in the ring that revolve very closely around each other. Since Bohr's radius R1 is still rotating inside the nucleus, the liquid state is obvious. The radius R2 equals 4, R1 equals 212 picometers, and this gives 4 times the number, that is 8 electrons in the ring. At the quantum number n equals 3, the ring is already formed by 18 electrons. At the quantum number n equals 4, there are 32, and so on. The next picture shows the allowed electron orbits. For the quantum number n equals 1, the smallest, Bohr's atomic radius is reached, which, as mentioned, possibly describes the liquid state. For n equals 2, the first gas structure is reached. Now the ponds are very mobile and rotate until they have no more charge. They are also large and repel each other in the close range. In the case of water vapor, the expansion is known. It is 1700 times in the air with N2, and with O2 that surrounds us also consists of gas of n equals 2. For n equals 3 is also reached as gas, provided there are enough, that is 18 electrons for the ring. The expansion is correspondingly large, to about 19,000 times. Then we remain with the original gas structure, which Rutherford still assumed, with 8 electrons in the ring. These have grown to 167 picometers and are magnetically attached. The basic law of electrical engineering E equals V cross B applies, whereby all 3 vectors are perpendicular to each other. The pointer of the electrical field E points outwards into the ring. V in turn is formed by the electron spin, and each sphere thus has a magnetic field along its axis of rotation. In this way, the 8 ring electrons take each other magnetically by the hand and prevent them from falling into the nucleus. The idea of the gas structure that is still valid today is completely different and has to make do with several postulates. Niels Bohr had partially invalidated classical physics because he assumed a constant size of the electron of 5.6 femtometers, which is still assumed today. Thanks to the field dependence of particles, we know that in the future we will be able to get along without Bohr's ominous postulates. As early as 1814, Ampere had spoken of 8 particles, as he called the atoms of which gas, in his opinion, consists. Today we know that there are 8 ring electrons in the gas shell, so we can continue without Bohr's postulates, for which Niels Bohr was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1922. Let us consider the noble gas neon as an example. Today it is common to speak of a halo structure as a substitute for the 8 inflated ring electrons. As a result of the rotation with the constant speed v gas, which is known to as a spin, they have the north and south poles drawn in. Now the whole ring can also be set in rotation by v red via rotation 2. This results in an additional magnetic field that is perpendicular to the plane of rotation. Normally, this has no further effect, since the gas molecules are so mobile and they compensate each other immediately. Let us come to the last point, the practical use of this gas with the quantum number n equals 2. We can cite countless examples of this and only want to pick out 2. The steam engine as the motor of industrialization and the water cell as a counterexample. Further examples will be added in part 2 of my presentation. The steam engine drove industrialization for many years. It could be improved in time up to an efficiency of 18%. It is a positive example of increasing water, from n equals 1. To gas, with n equals 2. It illustrates how gas expansion moves the piston. No carbon is involved, except for the heating of the water by burning coal. Theoretically, it would have been possible to supply the necessary heat to the water in a different way, completely free of carbon dioxide. However, this changed abruptly when the diesel engine took off with much better efficiency and with a gas expansion to n equals 3. The example of the diesel engine shows that designs with less power have no future. This is also true for hydrogen developments, even if hordes of engineers rush into them. This is also true of Stan Meyer, who very early on filed a patent for a voltage electrolysis and propagated the use of oxyhydrogen gas, which is also called brown gas. Here he explains the principle of how the thermally explosive energy is generated. He demonstrates in a beach buggy how it moves the car, at n equals 2. This is merely an improved steam engine. In fact, in the early days of automobile construction, there was a race between a car with a steam engine competing against another with an internal combustion engine, but the steam car lost the race because of n equals 2.